It's great to have you here today, Kirthi.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. This is Real Talk with Artists. I am your host, Cristina Trujillo, with the distinct honor of interviewing Kirthi Nath, queer woman of color, producer, filmmaker, who I just had the honor to work with. And I want everybody to get to know her if you don't know her already. But she is, I can't say more about her. I want her to let everybody know who she is that doesn't yet quite know her, and yeah, and share her story. Welcome, Kirthi. How are you doing today?
It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for navigating us through all this technology, even during Mercury retrograde.
Oh, that's right. Oh no, go away, Mercury retrograde. I swear, I feel like it always happens. This Mercury retrograde. It's so good to have you here, Kirti. I actually have your website up for those that are joining us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Here is the Kirti's website, in a magical media. So, Kirti, how about you tell us? How about you start with letting us know who you are and your story?
Well, thank you for inviting me here to share. And so, my name is Kirthi. And what my name means is, you can have roots in Kirtan, but also the name Kirti is like to praise the thing the most to be praised. And I also once was told it means victory, not the kind like you're winning a race, but of the spiritual sort. And I feel like my name has, been a guide for me, and I feel really thankful. And should we just go on with the personal story?
Absolutely. And let me ask you, Kirti, is this a good time to show folks the beautiful video we have for them?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So 1 second here as I pull this up for our audience on Instagram, and also I'm going to share this fantastic video here that Kirti made for us.
So it's just a little reel of some stills for people to get a taste of some of the work.
And here we go.
Are you able to loop it?
I am. I'm going to be able, I'll share it just right now
Okay.
on this other screen here. And here we go. Okay, here it is. Look at that. What are we looking at, Kirti? Walk us through this.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be some like glimpses when we talk about current projects and past projects. This is a glimpse into my new film, Paramita, which follows the spiritual journey of my friend Purga Paramita. And 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 then this is also some work I've done for V-Day and 1 Billion Rising. And this is for like a newcomer school. So actually, let me like kind of call back and we'll like just let this play in the background. And then I can share, we'll see like if some of these particular videos like come into the storytelling. Does that sound okay?
Absolutely.
Great. So, so as I was reflecting on my personal journey when I was about like 18 or 19, I was an undergraduate and I went to UC Berkeley. And I always wanted to go to Berkeley. I think I had like this idea of like activism and creativity. And I did go in the early 90s, so there was still some of that going on then. And I took a class and I found this book by Adrienne Kennedy called People Who Led to My Plays. And it was like the most creative biography I had ever read, where it's almost like this collage. And she literally like story tells and has montage and pictures of like the people who led to her plays. And
Okay.
and at this time, like I'm 18, like, I'm first time in college. I'm a young artist, aspiring artist, I would say. And I was just so wowed by this. And so it's interesting to reflect now with you, now that it's been like, 20 something years. So I can talk about people who've led to my films. And I'm thinking like even back in some of the pivotal moments in Berkeley where for my thesis, I was writing about fictional nonfiction. and I was looking at Carrie Mae Weems and her her series called Untitled Kitchen Table series. And what I learned from her was that sometimes, like, some of us, right, like queer people, people of color, some of us whose stories have not been uplifted, they've been erased, they've been silenced. So sometimes we have to, like, in our storytelling, we have, like, fictional nonfiction to kind of like really be able to like tell the story that kind of got lost and erased. And something else I learned from her was that, it's this really beautiful series, the Untitled, the Kitchen Table series, and she has like these photographs and these text, and she's really looking at stereotypes. And one of the things is, it's not just about replacing one stereotype with another, right? It's not about replacing who's in power, but it's about transforming it, and it's about dismantling the stereotype and offering something new. So, when we saw on my website that stories for our evolving culture, right? Like, there's a little bit about, if we want to change our culture, we have to change the stories we uplift. So that's like a little seed planting that started like 20 years ago. And yeah, and like, and two other things I think that are like important as my part of my story is, um, I did a lot of creative writing in college, and there wasn't like a film production program per se. And I came from a family where we couldn't afford a film camera, and so I did a lot of writing, and I used to write very cinematically. And I remember like looking outside, like, this philosophy class, and a little daydreaming. And I would like look out at like the trees, and I would like imagine like, like the way they were moving in the wind. And I would write about these things. And so people would always say, oh, your writing is so cinematic. And then actually my mom did, she did some catering jobs on the side, and she got me a mini DV JVC camera. and and I was in a class called Nation and Narration.
Okay.
And the teacher was like, you can do an essay or a creative project. And so I had been writing like this novella at the time called Distance and Proximities. And I took the first section and I made a film, which was narrating the story of the biography of my life at that point. Like, right. And in some ways it was like a love story to my mom and like this diasporic experience. And I share that because I made that into a film. And this is where, like, there's that not knowing that is so beautiful, because I applied to 4 grad schools. I said, I want to be a filmmaker. I had never really made film beyond this video. And I applied to 4 top tier schools, and I got into 3 of them. And had I known how competitive they would be, I think I would have been a little intimidated, but I didn't. So I went to UC San Diego, and I learned 16 millimeter film. I taught. And I think, like, one of the best ways to learn is like by teaching. So when I was in grad school, I made a lot of like 16 millimeter films. I had never, like, the most video I had done was like in teaching it, right? And this is like back in the 90s. So now it's like, video is something that's more of the language and even the cinematic language. And I'll share a few other things, and then we can like pause and come back to the personal journey. But when I finished grad school, I knew I wanted to come back to the Bay Area. And I applied for a job, and, she was like in her 3rd round of interviews, but somehow when she met me, she was like, oh, I need to hire this woman. And it was working at Girls Inc. And it was to be like, they called me the computer center lady. And I would like basically steward the computer space and like do curriculum. And that started my trajectory in youth media. And from Girls Inc., I went to BAVAC, Bay Area Video Coalition, and I was a tech. And then I was part of the youth media department, like running it, teaching it, doing distribution. And I learned so much being part of youth media. I think that's where I really learned how you tell a story and you empower people. You like, you co-create the space with them and like let them kind of show up for it. So those are like some of the pivotal moments. And I think while I had that, I like to call it the W-2 job, I was like teaching social justice filmmaking, and I was making what at that point we would call experimental film. And the
Okay.
and then I found my way into Buddhism, which is, I am South Indian and I'm South Asian, and Buddhism comes from my lineage, and I also grew up with Hinduism and yoga. So like, there are two parts of my trajectory where like you could tell in some of my personal films when I started practicing Buddhism, because you could feel like the lessons and the dharma, the teachings coming up in the storytelling. But there was always like this disconnect, right, between like the social justice filmmaking I was producing and then the more experiential film, I'd like to call it. And basically, long story shorter, in 2009, 2010, I was one of those people where in the depression we had at the time, like my job got terminated, and there were so many messages to start my own business. And yeah, like my friend connected me with Women's Initiative for Self-Employment, which is now a memory, but back then it was just such a beautiful space to learn the nuts and bolts of business and to be in community with people. And I don't think I would be here without that community and that support. And so that's when I really started like producing, and where like I was now producing the social justice films. And you and I have talked about this a lot, where we talk about shifting narratives, and it kind of comes from that inspiration with Carrie Mae Weems, right? Where I say, it's not just about like moving the message by I'm going to market to you, but it's about moving the message, right? It's about dismantling the stereotype, disrupting the white supremacy, and uplifting a new story. And the last thing I'll say before I pause is, I referenced that, this term experimental film.
Mhm.
And I actually think, like, I think of Toni Morrison, and she talks about like not writing to the white gaze.
Mhm.
And as I'm on my journey of reclaiming my lineage, reclaiming my place, I take my place, right? And part of my decolonizing is to kind of say, you know what, this is not experimental film. That's actually like a white narrative term, and my films are experiential. They're very like sensual. They like, are very spiritual. And so, I understand that, like, this kind of storytelling might be little new for people, but we're in the wake of a revolution. And we need, like, the new Buddha will be the Sangha, right? We all need to like show up in this community. And so I think it's really kind of like honoring like this kind of storytelling. And sometimes it's kind of hard because sometimes people don't understand it, and sometimes they do. So it's about just saying, like, you know what, I'm gonna like stay true to this calling and let it guide me.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you. So we have um, friends here who have joined us on Instagram. And while you were sharing your story, we just had these hearts come up. So thank you for
Oh.
those that are here. Estrella, hello. Thank you for those who are visiting us also on all the other um, broadcasting channels here. Kirti, there's just so much that came up while you were sharing so generously. But I also want to give the opportunity for those who have joined us on any other platform to comment, ask Kirti questions that you'd like to know. What came up for you as she was sharing her story, in terms of being a filmmaker, visual storyteller. Oh, Estrella said, well, hello, what a powerful story. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think there's definitely a lot that can come up for us, right? As we hear your story, Kirthi. I mean, I want to mention that I was so lucky to have been introduced to Kirthi by one of our mutual friends, Andrea, and I met Andrea through a group that we were doing called The Artist Way. And in getting to know one another, she felt like Kirthi and I needed to meet. And so serendipitously, we met right at the perfect time, because it was right when I felt that I needed Kirthi in my life without knowing, this is Kirthi Nath and she's out there. I think I definitely put it out in the ether because one of the things that I've noticed in just as an someone that loves films, someone that appreciates documentaries, visual storytelling, not that I've been a creator, but someone that really had this appreciation was in terms of documenting real life stories on the ground. Say for example, for nonprofit organizations, I always felt that there was something that was missing. I always felt that maybe the visuals were nice and compelling and technologically savvy, the essence of the story wasn't being revealed. And so when I looked into Kirthi and I saw your website, Kirthi, immediately I was like, I devoured your website because I was like, she gets it. You know how to capture real stories and and capture them on film, right? And you mentioned something like what you do is you co-create and you allow people to show up. Is that, would you say, is that one of your secret sauces?
Well, I think it comes back to my spiritual practice, right? Where I'm devoted to presence. And my North Star is kindness and also being a ripple in the revolution. And I think that whether I'm actually interviewing the person, right? Like I think the way, like when you hear the interviews, it's because I'm genuinely interested. And so, there's a way you ask questions where you're inviting someone to reveal themselves. And I really would love to hold it with such respect and tenderness and such care. And there's also a lot of projects where I've edited, right? So I'm not the one necessarily doing the filming, like for 1 Billion Rising and V-Day. It's a global movement. I can't be everywhere. I'm magic, but not, I don't got that power. But there's also a way where, when I look through footage, I'm also like, looking at every detail. So that's why, when you see the videos and the films, it's kind of like, oh, when that foot or when that hand did that one thing, right? And also, like, especially in a lot of these films, which are social justice films, people are, they're really showing up to be these change makers. And so I need to show up for them and I need to listen to them. And so I'm like, constantly, now that I have a lot of experience, I know what's the information, but I know also how to listen to the magical moments. And so I think like, it's not as, so this is like an open secret now where I think presence is, so much
Yes.
part of it. And also like there's something about uncertainty, and again, I can say this because I have a lot of experience, right? So I can like put things, I have a foundation, but then now I can like really settle in the uncertainty. And I'm reminded of a talk someone gave where a lot of times we say love and light and we're scared to talk about the darkness, but
Mm.
our first experience was in the darkness. It was in the womb, right? It was like where we were like growing and nurturing. And there's like a gift of like not knowing, because then things can be beyond your imagination.
That is quite powerful. I love that so much. When you said that I envisioned us, right, essentially as a seed inside the ground and it's all dark and we're trying to blossom. That's incredible. With that said, I am really intrigued. Again, I want to invite folks that have joined us to please join us. Let's make this interactive. You're more than welcome to ask Kirti questions, comments, anything. I do have a question, Kirti, because
Mhm.
I would love to know, like, what advice would you give your 20-year young self and, and 20 years older and also present Kirti?
Yeah. So I was actually very lucky. One of my dear friends, Sumi Kaipa, was working for Margaret Jenkins, who's a dancer. And back when I was making these personal films, which are very spiritual. And it's interesting because, I had an audience within my friends and certain people, but a lot of people weren't quite there on that journey. And so it's interesting now my films are received in a different way as more people are like in the dance with spirituality. But I remember something Sumi told me that Margie had told her, which was sometimes you need to create a body of work for people to understand your work. And so there was like, a little bit like a seed of like persistence there. So what I would tell my younger self is um, to persist and to stay close to the vision, because what's going on is I'm rooting and I'm reclaiming. And as I'm reclaiming, I'm also learning, right? And this is the storytelling of like a decolonized storytelling. And so there were times where it would just come out of me and I wouldn't know. So I tell my younger self, you know, take the chances, listen to your heart, stay present with the story, and don't be swayed by the put downs, right? Those are just things like that are moving in the wind. But like, stay close to the story, stay close to the people you're uplifting. And this is the process of decolonization, and it's gonna come into like blooms that you never imagined.
I love that so much. Now, for folks who are new in the revolution, and I love what you said that you're the ripple in the revolution. For folks that are new, for folks that are waking up, right, to all of the inequities, the broken structure that we live in, what would you, what it, just in maybe in one, two sentences, how do you uh, vision, right, or how we need to shift narratives and why? So essentially, I know you understand this, but what advice like would you give folks new to this to this revolution in
Mm.
terms of shifting narratives and why that's important, especially through film?
Mm. So I think it's also like beautiful for us to like be in a non-binary way of feeling and thinking. So there is that the non-binary of feeling it and being with all the feelings, which can be overwhelming, right? But there is also like action. So even in the Bhagavad Gita, I was just reading a sutta where Krishna says to Arjuna something to the effect of, you have a right to your actions, but not the fruits of your actions. Right. So even in Buddhism, it's like if you want to plant an orange tree, don't put apple seeds, but we can't control what grows. Right. So there's this thing of like, we must act, we must be present, but we also have to like, deeply feel and experience to even understand what we're feeling and how to move through it. And there's going to be some grief, right? Like these are emotions that we may not be familiar with, and there might be overwhelm, but like, when we kind of like can heal ourselves and we can show up for the inequities of the world. And I think more specifically in like, and this reminds me of like yoga, where and even Buddhism, where there is all these tenets of like interconnection, right? And yoga is supposed to be about unity, and there's also a lot of spiritual bypass that happens. So I say, this aspiration of feeling our interconnectedness is so beautiful, and let that guide us as we wake up to the systems that are harming. And when it harms someone else, it harms all of us. So I think it's just about like, we have to hold really the awareness of the oppression that's happening in the systems. And then we can always ask ourselves, how can I be part of non-harm?
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm feeling touched, and in fact, I'm feeling so grounded right now. How's everyone feeling? I know we have people who are joining us. Please feel free. Oh, thank you for that, Kirti. Like that just grounded me, Kirti. Thank you so
Mhm.
much. And I'm so glad that we're going to be able to have this recording, right? Forever now, because it's going to be saved out everywhere. So we can go back and listen to it whenever we need just some of Kirti's magic and just that essence that you bring. Thank you so much, Kirti. I do have oh, he says, Estrella said, me too, such eloquence and wisdom. Yes, it's so poetic. Speaking of which, Kirti, I have a question. You mentioned that I think you mentioned cinematography writing. So for those of us also that are interested in the arts and creative art, what is cinematography writing?
Or cinematic writing.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Cinematic writing.
And I think like there's a way where in my writing where that's where it's like it's going back to like the senses, right? So you'll even see this in my films and in some of the stills, where it's like being in touch with the sensations and describing it like with like a texture, and to like kind of like get into the vortex of like what is that moment in the story.
I love
and
that.
and
Okay.
and something about like the writing, which I think does translate to the films, is it's the extraordinary in the ordinary,
Mm,
and
okay.
really being present to these like moments of being. And
And you have to be present in order to be able to describe, right? In order to be able
Mhm.
to observe and then describe, and then having to find the right words to explain what you're seeing, what you're feeling, right? Viscerally. Okay, thank you so much. With that, can you let us know any of your current projects right now? What are you currently working on?
Yeah, so on the client side, I am so honored. You're going to start hearing like a theme emerging. um, well, I do work very actively with 1 Billion Rising in V-Day, which is a movement to end violence against women and girls. I've been working with them for about 6 years. That's the still from Swaziland. It's on my website. You can watch the story. Now we moved on to another story. And and what I really love about that movement is like I feel like I've learned a lot about intersectional feminist storytelling,
Okay.
because it's really like these amazing leaders from all over the world who are these change agents. Like they're the beloved community I look to. And so going into now like some of the themes, I'm working with a nonprofit called Off the Mat, which is all about bringing together yoga and activism.
Oh,
So this is about like d- disrupting the spiritual bypass, and actually saying like yoga and activism is not separate. And so I feel very honored to be telling the story of this like really beautiful organization, which is so collaborative, and it like uplifts people, and they do a lot of workshops and offer a lot of trainings to let people simultaneously like tend to their own healing,
mhm.
but also be the change agents in the world. And in the yoga community, like it is very like white centered and white dominant, and there's a lot of like pain from like the white, the white supremacy and like the colonization. So I feel really thankful to being able to steward that story. And then I'm also working with Susanna Bartaki, who is coming out with a new book, Embrace Yoga's Roots, and I'm in a teacher training with her right now. And what I love about it is like there are so many people of color, and there are so many people, it's a mixed race group, where we are committed to social justice. And this is like the yoga of social justice and the yoga of like awakening. So I'm going to be working with her to help share some of the profound experiences that are coming out of the yoga teacher training. And then I also had the privilege of making a film for my partner, Rebecca Kaplan, who's running for the Oakland City Council at large. So, that video you're going to have to see on Facebook. And, and then I'll also share some of my self-funded films where I'm working on a series called Magical Messages. We Were Made for These Times. And it's going to be a film in series, and then ultimately it'll be a feature length. And the first film is actually playing at CamFest starting tomorrow. So it's in the video on demand section. It's aptly in a program called Beyond Magic. And so the idea for magical messages, we were made for these times, and the first installment is called I Take My Place. It's a documentary series that reclaims the South Asian traditions of yoga, Buddhism, and earth-based mysticism for an intersectional feminist meditation, where we're really exploring wisdom and collective healing and women of color solidarity.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I have Estrella said I want to do the training. Can you share the info?
Yes, we'll have to look that up. So
Yes.
give me 1 second. Yes, it's an amazing training.
And
And
we can absolutely DM anyone who needs the
yes,
information. We can message you right after the show. That's wonderful. I want to say
definitely.
my
Oh,
sis. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, oh, and then can I share about the other new film I'm doing?
Please, absolutely.
Okay. And then also, if you want to go to the stills, I think they're
Yes,
numbers.
I'm gonna check the stills now. Okay, give me a
Okay.
minute. And then I'll flip my phone around so y'all could see what we're sharing here. Okay, what number would you like me to share?
Basically 5 through 8.
5 through 8. Okay.
Yeah. So this film is in a series called Women of Color Walking Us All Home. And again, this is going to be like, a series, but like the first film is called Paramita, and it follows the spiritual story of my friend Proga, who is a healer, and she grew up, she's South Asian, she's queer, she's an activist. She grew up with Hinduism and practices Buddhism. And so we go through her spiritual story in 3 sections. And so I'm currently working on the first section. And then I haven't quite told them yet, but I actually have 2 other women of color Buddhist teachers I have in mind, where I want to like profile them, because again, it's coming back to the stories of like, how do we honor like the divine feminine in like these traditions of like Buddhism and our spiritual stories, and like reclaiming that. And in of course it's going to be connected also to like how we show up as change agents. So that's a little still from the Paramita film, which is currently being edited. Yes. And then I think the next one is the one that you really loved. No, this is Proga. Yeah, so I the first part of this story is exploring her coming out to herself and to her mother. And within that, we have the story of grief, right? Like things being different than what we thought, and the story of a relationship, and the story of equanimity, of them being in relationship as they navigate. And so this is like one of the stills, like where we were in the ocean, and she's meditating, and like this is like this is a mudra for the one of the meditating mudras. And then the other thing is like this film, and even the magical messages, like there is a way where we are of the earth, like we are water, we are of the light and the water. And so this is also about like really letting us dance with the elements, and like as we remember and as we take our place to like come from that place of being part of the elements.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
and
exquisite.
yeah, and then for Australia, I put some links for her. We can DM her later.
Oh, I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Estrella is actually my sister. She lives in Berlin, and she's a
Oh.
yeah, she's a yoga teacher for kids, certified yoga teacher for kids. I like to call her like the Mary Poppins of the yoga teacher for kids. She's so wonderful and adorable. Tell us about this one here, Kirti.
Yeah, so that's also part of the Paramita, the first section that I
Mm-hmm.
was just sharing. And I'm still working with the imagery, and like this is part of the
Mm-hmm.
filmmaking, right? It's about like getting to know the story, getting to know the image, and like letting it tell me where it wants to go in the story. So, we're still in the dance. But like there's also a time when, um
Wow.
it's just like, I remember like, when I came out to my mom, we're still in process and we're still in journey, but I also have to kind of like, emerge, and I have to kind of like embrace what is.
Wow. Yeah, that is absolutely beautiful. And you mentioned grief. We tend to think
Mhm.
of grief as something that we go through when there's like a physical loss, where oftentimes we actually experience grief when during these changes. And you very eloquently and generously shared with us what that is when you're coming out, when you're revealing your truth, right,
Mhm.
to a parent, right, that has different expectations of us, right. And so thank you for sharing that. I think it's very important for folks to know that grief can actually come in different forms.
Mhm.
That is very important. Okay, with that, Kirthi, with few more moments that I have here with you today, I wanted to, let's see, what's up next on our list. So, for folks that are just joining us, what is the name of the film that's going to be featured at the CamFest?
Yeah, so the film is called Magical Messages. We Were Made for These Times.
Magical Messages. We are made for these times. I'm
And
gonna, yeah,
yeah, and it's in a shorts program called Beyond Magic.
so for folks that want to see it, where would they go to watch it?
So if you go to CamFest,
Mm-hmm.
campfest.org,
Mm-hmm.
this is like the festival is going to go live tomorrow, and this will be part of the video on demand section. So now anybody can see it anywhere. And you can get tickets on CamFest. Yeah. And they'll have a limited amount of like live drive-through, drive-in kind of events, but I'm in the video on demand section.
I love it. And Kirti, with all this great work that you do, and how you're so generous with also your time with nonprofits, right? Most of the time, nonprofits don't have these big budgets, right? To, uh, yeah, for filmmaking. So tell us, like, since you're out there being of service to the community, how can community come through for you? What type of support do you need, um, so that you can continue to, fully keep showing up for us?
Mhm. Oh, well, thank you for asking. Well, I'm in production for both Paramita and Magical Messages. So anyone who can help be part of the funding team, or is connected with anyone, or like some links for people who might want to help support like through financial contributions, like that would be so appreciative. And also like, it lets me focus on the film, right? It lets me like
Yes.
take the time to edit it, because I think it's really important that, especially as women of color, like we pay ourselves. And part of service is like we take care of ourselves so we can show up. So that's one thing. And then also like I actually need to redesign my website. It's like a technical story I won't go into. So if there is anybody who has like some means to like be able to donate their time, or if actually someone could actually sponsor, so we can hire a website developer to help fix my website. I just love like that circularity. That would just be so helpful, because I know a lot of technical things, but the website is just, it's not one of them right now.
I still think it's lovely, and I'm glad you have a place where people can go to see your work.
Yeah, yeah. It's just that I can't update it right now, so that's why I have to do it all over. It's like the whole complication of how different companies work.
Yeah. And do you have a Patreon account?
Not yet.
Not yet. That would be great. We got to get you a Patreon account, Kirti, so you can direct people over to your Patreon account. That sounds wonderful. And let's see. So thank you for that. I think that is really important. I want to share something that came up for me when we had the opportunity to collaborate on a special project. You mentioned how we need to, as women of color in business, we need to take care of ourselves. And I want to share with everyone what that meant when I was working with Kirthi. So when we were, working with a client, Kirthi was really good about understanding our value, understanding the time, the value even within the time that we were taking. And I won't go into details, but my big takeaway in working with you was that I learned from working with you. I learned how to even unroot sort of like that my own sort of poverty mindset that comes honestly from not just growing up in poverty, but also having worked for such a long time in the nonprofit sector, right? It's almost like this root that I have that I, I'm not deserving, right? And I think we all, suffer from this. It depend, for if we come from vulnerable, communities and backgrounds. And so I just want to thank you, Kirthi, because working with you and just listening to you, really taking notes on how to make that shift, right? Like, no, like our time is very valuable and this is important, right? And understanding how to navigate through that, but also communicate. So thank you because you're an amazing communicator. And so with that, I want to say that we actually worked. We recently worked together on a project with Mutual Housing. Mutual Housing is a nonprofit organization, affordable housing developer who goes beyond developing affordable housing. So big shout out to Mutual Housing and Stephen Rue, who's just the most ideal client we could ever have. So we worked on this video together, and I wanted to ask you, Kirthi, what stood out for you when we worked together? And so what stood out working together and, with Free Media?
Mhm. I think it was such a beautiful experience to work with you. And the word that's like coming up is like collaboration. And I feel like that project had so much collaborative energy, and that was just really amazing, because a lot of times, I'm like the one woman band, and it can get lonely. And I think, especially when you're telling community stories, like there's something that happens when you're telling it like in collaboration with community and in community. So I just loved the way that, we were able to, in the process of like working together, we got to know each other and also like communicate. And then also like, be able to be like, hey, can you clarify this?
Yes.
Right? Like, this is part of the things. And I'll just share some things of like, if we stepped on each other's toes, like we would just talk about it and we would like be able to repair really quickly and then kind of like come back to the project. And but I felt like there was just so much like a beautiful energy of like teamwork and collaboration. And I think that made a huge difference in the story. And so I feel really thankful for that experience, because it's not always like that, right? Like we can plant the seed, but we can't control what blooms.
You have the best sayings, the best quotes. I have to go back and just jot down all these quotes and then just make memes of your quotes, Kirti. I love it. Here on our other channels, I have social and spiritual values in the process of filmmaking, because you brought that to this project, Kirti. When I created Remedia, it was with the 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 set of values, with the pillars of never compromising my own social values, right? And you did that, and then in addition to that, you were able to bring in that spiritual process as well, which is why for me it felt like it was like it just easy in terms of communicating with you, because number one, so much respect for you, right? I have so much respect for you. I
Thank
was
you.
learning from you, and then it's funny, y'all, because both Kirti and I, we're gems, meaning we're Geminis. And so, and so we have this energy, right? But I think because of this mutual respect, right, it flowed. Like sometimes, yeah, we needed to be clear on what we were talking about and what we wanted,
Mhm.
but the intention for us was always clear. And I want to say, Kirti, I think it's because not only were our social values aligned, but also our spiritual values are aligned. So thank you for that, because that's what I feel that you brought into the process of filmmaking.
Mm, thank you.
And I really appreciate that. And so anyone again that's joining us, I'm really happy we have, yeah, we have an audience here. I'd love to know if anybody has questions for us, any oh, there we have my colleague and wonderful mentor and friend Deborah just joined us. She says, thanks for my uplift today. Thank you, Kirti. Yes.
Thanks for being here, everybody.
Yes, I love it. And so any last words of wisdom, of anything that you like to leave us with, Kirti?
A story keeps coming to me. I was on a 7-day meditation retreat, and and it's actually, like, I like to say, they're not so silent because there's the voice in our head. And you're with people in noble silence, but we're with a lot of energy. And the teachers give talks and we have interviews. And I remember, um like in the walking meditation at night, I remember walking along the bench and seeing like these leaves and like the light coming through the leaves and thinking, wow, this is so beautiful. So of course I'm like, doing my camera imagination, and I'm thinking, I'm fantasizing of like, how would I film this, because it's so beautiful. I want to share it, right? Like that's just my natural instinct. And I remember talking to the teacher and being like, I understand, like, I'm here to be present and, to meditate, but I really was just like really wanting to like think about like, how do I film this? And that's where my mind was going. And she says something so beautiful to me. She said, that's a beautiful aspiration to want to share something that you feel is so beautiful. But what I would invite you to do is to actually spend more time with like the walk, with the arrival and like the departure from like this leaf and like the light, and like get to know it, like get to know your experience. And so then when you share your story, you're sharing from like this like deeper place. So I think of that often. Yeah, I think of that often. And like, when you're asking me to describe the image for the Paramita film, it's just like I'm getting to know it.
Very powerful. So, Kirti, how can people reach you? How can they contact you?
So you can go to my website, cinemagicalmedia.com, and there is a contact page there. So you can contact me there, or cinemagicalmedia@gmail.com, making it really easy for people. And, I'm Kirthi Magic on Instagram, and it also has my Cinemagical Instagram. And I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter, but I need to get a little more active, to be
Yeah,
honest.
you haven't been active on Twitter, miss.
Well, I've been busy making films, and like I'm been busy with the revolution.
Yes, yeah, you've been busy with, yeah, with the art stuff. I love it. So I also want to mention that I would love to work with you again, Kirti. I think that we work so well together. And so this is a plug for all other social impact organizations out there. Y'all know that Kirti has a tremendous experience as a filmmaker capturing these stories on the ground. So in order to like ignite inspired action, right? And in my experience is in community economic development. So that nice sort of like marriage
Mhm.
between like what Kirti brings to the table, and even with her experience with nonprofits, but also in my experience working for nonprofits on the ground as a practitioner, and also having the experience of being a first-gen immigrant from Ecuador, having lived and survived through extreme poverty, and understanding the stories that essentially many nonprofits are trying to capture on film, right? And share those stories genuinely. So it's not like the CEO sharing the story, but it's really the people on the
Mhm.
ground, the real stories. And that's what Kirthi does so beautifully and perfectly. And I learned so much from you, Kirti. I always, back in the day, like even 10 years ago, I had envisioned documenting these stories, right, for the nonprofit sector. And fast forward, this dream came true and the stars align. Andrea, it's so beautiful. And I would love to continue collaborating with you, merging our businesses together and creating beautiful things for folks.
Yes, I feel the same. So seed is planted. So anyone who wants to join the party.
Come right in. All right. Thank you so much, Kirti. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. We're so happy. We wish everyone a good week. Thank you, Kirti, for your service,
Thank
for
you.
everything you teach us. Ah, big, big hug. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Join us. Thank you, sister. Thank you, everyone.